Sanbonani. Today I decided let's just take a step back and go back to noun classifications and subject concords. The reason for this is just having listened when people speak and the questions that people write, that we need to just go back to it a bit. So yes, so this is a pre-recorded message for that. With nouns in isiZulu, you know how in English you've got really three types of nouns: person, place, thing. And so everything is just classed there. In isiZulu, we have the 8 different classes that we do. But in those 8 different classes, there is nothing that says that, oh, in this particular class, we only speak of people. And in this particular class, we only speak of things, and this type of thing or that type of thing. No, they're actually a bit mixed. The mixing is really according to how you speak of that particular thing or person or place. So say, for example, if you were talking about a man, you can talk about a man as calling the man by name and say ubeki, right? Or you can talk about a man and say ubaba, or you can talk about a man and say indoda. Or you can talk about a man and say umnumzane. So that's 4 different ways, for example, that I've just made examples of talking about a man. Umnumzane is sir, of course, as in a gentleman. And it starts with an as you can tell. And definitely is going to class 1. So umnumzane. Then when we talk about umnumzane, then we will say umnumzane uyafunda. We are talking about a man and saying indoda. Indoda is then going to be in class 5, because in class 5, that's where we find nouns that start with in or im. And those nouns, when we then use them in sentences, then we say indoda iyafunda. But listen, we're still talking about a man. We're still saying that the man is reading. But here we said umnumzane uyafunda. And now we are saying indoda iyafunda. So, okay, let's move on to, we also said ubeki, and we also said ubaba. Ubeki and ubaba are both in class 1, but both of them are in class 1A. Ubaba, we would say uyafunda. Ubeki, we would say uyafunda. So dad or father is reading, and beki is reading. Both of them are saying just like umnumzane. So what we are saying here, or what I'm saying here, is you speak of the noun itself is classified or grouped with nouns that behave the same way. So for example, when we then find a noun that is, like for example, indoda, when you find it in class 5 and you're finding in that very same group or class of nouns, you find inja, a dog, and you find indlulamiti, a giraffe, or you find indlovu, an elephant, it does not change who the man is. We're not saying that the man is a thing. So do not think about isiZulu in English and then start applying the same rules as you would in English. So always remember you're learning a different language. It is not English. And so that is, I think that is the most important thing. Once you then get to that, because then you also then get questions of, why is ingane suddenly not a human, and you find ingane being called a thing, ingane, and whereas the other people in the family are called people, as in udadewethu to forward. But the whole family is also in class 5. Indoda, inkosikazi, let me just go back. Indoda, a man. Inkosikazi, a wife. Indodana, a son. Indodakazi, a daughter. And then ingane, a child. But there's also ingane in class 1. Umntwana. Umntwana. That is a child as well. So let's not confuse it and look at it in a way. And also, I don't believe it is sexist, because if it was sexist, these are questions I have received. If it was sexist, then I believe that also then the male people would not be in class 5, because then why are they in class 5 and classing themselves they if they are not, if this is something that is supposed to be looked down upon. So it's just getting that out of the way, instead of having to respond to one person at a time. Let me just rather say it in a video and everyone can see. So anyway, so having said that, so let me just share here a blank screen, basically a blank document, and then we'll start with class 1. So in class 1, you have two parts of class 1. You have you have in class 1 the full-on class 1, and then you have class 1A, which I look at it as a subsection of class 1. So in class 1, you then have things like this. You have umuntu, a person. You have, I'm just making a couple of examples. You have umfundisi, which, because I am who I am, I need to explain it again. Umfundisi, we say, means pastor. But if we were to think of pre-missionary times and pre-colonial times, umfundisi meant a teacher, so one who teaches. If you add an ISA at the end of a verb, as in fundisa, so you have the verb funda, and then that means to learn or study or read. Now you are changing this verb and putting an ISA to it, and you're saying fundisa. You're saying teach. So it's one who teaches. So now if we're saying umfundisi, that's now the teacher. But nowadays, umfundisi is known as a pastor. And it does get a bit interesting, because pastors are not necessarily the preachers all the time. So it does get a bit interesting in the way you look at it. So, and it does leave this wanting to call umfundisi a pastor or a church minister type of, as in one of the clergy. It does leave this thinking in other people to say that, oh, so there was no teaching in Africa or in Amanguni and Amazulu pre-colonial times, whereas actually there was. So yes, so that's something that we've just got to, it's one of those things that is said about a language, losing a language. So the thing about this class is, the thing about this class of nouns is that some of them then come from verbs, like this one, umfundis, like umfundi, a learner, umfundi, if I can spell it, umfundi, a learner. So some of them then come from verbs. Like for example, you have the verb pheka, which means cook. If I used it on its own, speaking to you, I would say pheka, but that would mean I am giving you a command to cook. So now let's say, for example, let's say you're taking this verb and you're wanting to make it into a noun. Then the person who cooks, at first, and then we say phe, and then we put in an I at the end. So umpheki, a cook. And let's think of another verb. Another verb is akha, which means to build. If we're now saying the one who builds, then we would say and then a ki, an I at the end. And then suddenly that is now a builder. If I can spell it. There we go. So here you find yourself, you've got nouns that start with as you can tell here. nouns that are beginning with Now these nouns, when we make them plural, we will say aba. Some of them begin with umu, like this one, umuntu. So they begin with umu. And then when we now make them plural, they will now all become aba. So let's just do that here under them. So abantu. So that's people. Abafundisi. Abafundisi. You will find this word also when people say, you can say abefundisi. It's still okay, it's still acceptable, but it's really abafundisi, the people who teach. And umfundi, abafundi, learners or students. Cooks, abapheki. And also chefs, by the way. It doesn't sound very specialized once it's grouped together as cooks, but chefs also fall in this group as well for isiZulu. So abakhi is builders. So do you see the trend? Aba is in the plural of these nouns in class 1, which are simply people. Some of them are straight up people, like saying umuntu, but some of them are coming from verbs, as in funda. So we see the verb in there, as in pheka. We see the verb in there, as in akha. We see the verb in there. So some of them then are coming from verbs, and some of them are just straight up people. And then we have class 1A, which I was saying is a subsection of class 1. The reason I'm saying it's a subsection is because we are still talking of people, but we are talking of them differently. Their prefix is different, and we are also talking of food items, not every food item. So not isinkwa, bread will not be here. But say, for example, and not idombolo, which is a dumpling, but ujeqe, for example. Ujeqe, which is my favorite, more than idombolo. So ujeqe is steamed bread. When we have a plural of ujeqe, we say ojeqe. That is the difference between this one, class 1A, and class 1. Ojeqe, so steamed breads. Then we have people. We were saying people, we could say, for example, mother, umama. But when we are talking about her in plural, we will say omama. So mothers. Let's look at sister. Sister ngesiZulu is simply dadewethu. So udadewethu, sister. And then we can have odadewethu. This is now plural. Sisters. We can have here ubaba, obaba. That's father and fathers. We can have umfowethu, a brother, and abafowethu. But that would be in class 1, not in class 1A, but in class 1 instead. So it would be up here in its umfowethu, brother, and abafowethu, brothers. Now, if you look at these, they all look simple, it's clear. Now, let's say we are making sentences with them. That's where now the work begins. This is why we group them the way we do. Now, let's make a sentence using umuntu. I would like you to pay attention to the trend. Umuntu uyahamba. Umama uyahamba. Do you see? Mom is walking or going or leaving, and the person is going or walking or leaving, right? But do you see what I'm wanting you to see here? It's U. This U is what's important. We were speaking about them. We use the subject concord U. So it's the same subject concord for singular for class 1 and for class 1A. Now let's talk about many people, abantu. Abantu bayahamba. Do you see that ba? Let's look again down here. Oh mama. Oh mama bayahamba. Do you see that ba? The ba is what we are paying attention to. This is what makes it being to be grouped here and classed here or categorized here in class 1 and in class 1A. Otherwise, we would have put this U in a different class. We would have put this U maybe in class 2 or maybe in class 6 or maybe in class 7, you know, or in class 8, wherever else that there are things that start with U. But we put it here because one, it is a person that start with U, but when there are many, when we talk about them, we also still say ba. And when they are singular, we say U, just like we do with class 1. So now let's say we were talking about umaki or umfundisi. Umaki, look at it. Umaki uyakha. The builder is building. You can also say builds. Abakhi bayakha. The builders are building or build. The builders build. Now if you look here, it's the same thing. We are talking about udadewethu, sister. Let's say she is building. Udadewethu uyakha. Do you see we are using the same subject concord? And if we are saying udadewethu in plural, we are still using the same subject concord. So that is why these nouns are in class 1, in class 1A. They behave the same way. It doesn't matter what tense the verb is. Even if we took that very same verb for udadewethu, are classified together because of the way they behave. In class 2, you find nouns that also start with We could have put these nouns in class 1 because the nouns in class 1 start with and umu. And these ones also start with and umu. But let's look at them and see why they are separated from class 1. This one, let's look at umkhumbi, a ship. When it's plural, it's imikhumbi. Do you see? The plural prefix is different from the one in class 1. In class 1, then it would have been abakhumbi. You see? Here we are saying imikhumbi. Let's say a finger, umunwe. Do you see the prefix is the same as in class 1? Umu. But when we make them plural, it's iminwe, fingers. If we are looking at a leg, umlenze, a leg, imilenze, plural. I don't know why I'm writing it again. Imilenze. Now, the reason they are together is because of the way they behave. So we wouldn't take it now and put it in class 1, because in class 1 it will have to be, the prefix will have to be aba. And so that's why they are separated from class 1. So when we are looking at nouns in class 2, we speak of them differently. So if you think about it, then we are saying, for example, umlenze, ubuhlungu, it's still the same subject concord as in the singular of class 1. But let's think about the plural of it. The plural will have to be different. So let's just write it down here so you can see the difference. So let's say we said umlenze. Imilenze. Ibuhlungu. Do you see that it's different? The subject concord is I. It's not aba. When it's not aba lenze, so we're not going to say a buhlungu or ba buhlungu rather, because these are not people. So we are not talking about them and say ba buhlungu. We are going to say I buhlungu. Now let's look at class 3. The nouns in class 3 are also classified together because of the way they behave. There are different nouns that start with I and I, as in the letter I. There are different types of nouns. There are nouns that start with an I followed by any type of vowel. There are nouns that start with an I but followed with an S. There are nouns that start with an I but followed with an by an N and an M. So we group them differently because of how they because of their prefix. So this one that starts with an I, class 3. Ikhanda, head. Plural, amakhanda, heads. Now, you're looking at them. You can see obviously already that the plural is different from the other ones that we've already spoken of. The plural is ama. We haven't seen ama before this class. We haven't seen a plural that does this. So let's see how they behave when we are talking about them now in full sentences. Let's say head is so, ikhanda li buhlungu. Let's say the heads are so, amakhanda abuhlungu. So you are not using anything that is similar to what you've already used in the past. If you are looking at these subject concords, they are different from the ones you've already used in the past. So that is something important to keep noting. And so that is why the noun is put together and are grouped together. So for example, here you would also find iqolo, which is really like sort of, it's your bag, but more of the small of your bag, not really just your whole bag, but more of the small of your bag. and amaqolo, then small of backs. So that's the plural of it. So when we are talking about them, we would say amaqolo abuhlungu, iqolo libuhlungu. We can look at ihlo, ihlo libuhlungu, and I, amehlo abuhlungu, amehlo abuhlungu. So we are looking at them and we can see that they are not going to be grouped with other nouns because they are not behaving the same way. That's why they are grouped on their own. Now let's look at the next class. The next class is class 4, of course. And class 4 has is and isi. Now with this one, we can have, for example, okay, we're just talking about the face, so isihlati. So let me just look, isihlati, a cheek, and izihlati, cheeks. Do you see? The plural is easy, and even the singular here, we're saying isi. We're not doing the same thing as here. Look at this one. We have our e in the singular, but then the next vowel is the next consonant is some other consonant that is not an s and is not an n or m, and that's why it is here on its own in class 3. And this why these ones with the is, they will always be classed together, because when we start speaking of them, isihlati, let's use that same adjective, and we're saying buhlungu, so sore or painful. So let's use that same one, sibuhlungu. So the cheek is sore. And let's look at the izihlati, zibuhlungu. Whatever you are talking about that has an isi and an easy, you are going to put this subject concord. The is and isi is going to have si, and the easy is going to have z as its subject concord. It doesn't matter what it is. Now, the other nouns that you would find here, I'm just trying to think of the top of my head here. Other nouns you would find here are ising. I don't know why I'm now thinking of body parts, but anyway, nouns like ising. Ising is a butt, so one butt cheek, not both, but one. Ising. Izing. Izing is then two, so plural, butt cheeks. So we are not going to then talk about ising the same way that we spoke about a finger, umunwe. We are not going to say ising ubuhlungu. It's not a finger, so it doesn't start with an so we will not say that. We will say ising si buhlungu. So then when we have the next one is class 5. Class 5, it's also still starting with an I, but it's an IN and an IM. So that's the one I go on a rant about sometimes, of course. So indoda, ingane, indodakazi, indodana, inkosikazi. Do you see? It's people. But we also have others that are not people. Inja, for example, indlulamthi, indlovu, ingwenya, ingwe. Just giving some examples so that we can see there are so many different others that are not people. it does not lower the status of the person and make them something that they are not. But what I do like about it, but this is me, this is not something that I don't know any scholar who thinks that way, who has ever said it, so I don't know what they would say, but this is me. I feel it does humble a human to also be classified in the same way as you would classify, or in the same class or group as you classify other created beings. So if you know that inhlabathi is created by God, as in soil, and then you're now thinking, oh, even me, inkosikazi, indodakazi yazabo, is a created being, and so I fall under the same with inhlabathi. So it does have that, for me, it does have that humbling effect. It does not make me a thing that I am classed together with it. It does not make me a thing. And yes, it is not sexist, I believe, because you look at it, every single, both genders are in here, as in male and female. They are both represented here. Now, with this class, you'll then find that when we speak of them, oh yes, they also the ones that start with I am. The ones that start with I am, you've got to then remember, because I think I've seen people when they write, they'll remember the ones that start with IN, but they'll forget the ones that start with IN. So just with IM, so like Imbali, for example. So just remember that there are also those ones in here. Now, and it's not every single thing that is a creature, a living creature. So for example, I can make an example and say Imbali, which is a flower, but it doesn't mean that every single thing that is a creature is in here. For example, let's take the word, yes, it's borrowed, it's from English, but imfoloko. Imfoloko is a fork. That also falls in here. So there are those ones as well. So imfundo, which is education. Now I'm writing education here, imfundo. So it also falls in here. So it's not necessarily creatures or created beings that fall under here. Ingubo is a dress or a blanket, both of them, yesiZulu. So it also falls in here. So yes, so you speak about them differently than you would, the things that start with I that are in class 4. So let's look at these now. There's something interesting about them that you must note once we go to plural. So we'll talk about them in the singular for now. So in the singular, indoda iyahamba, ingane iyahamba, the man is walking, ingane iyahamba, the child is walking, indodakazi iyahamba, the daughter is walking, inkosikazi iyahamba, the wife is walking, inkosazana, it's a daughter as well, but it's more like saying the princess iyahamba, so that princess is walking. Inkosana also falls under here as well. It's a son, but it's really more of a prince. So inkosana iyahamba, the prince is walking. Do you hear that I am talking of people and I'm not talking of things? So just because they are classed here in class 5 does not make them things, does not take away their human nature or human form. And then we have here, like say if we are talking about inja, let's say the dog is walking or the dog is leaving, we will also say exactly the same thing and say inja iyahamba. Indlovu, an elephant, iyahamba. Ingwenya, a crocodile, iyahamba. Ingwe, a leopard, iyahamba. It's also ingwe, idla ngamabala. I love proverbs. So ingwe idla ngamabala, meaning the leopard eats by its spots. If you look at it, look at that I. Idla ngamabala. If we were using this verb idla to eat, and we were talking about umuntu, we would have said umuntu uyadla, or umuntu udla ngemfoloko. The person eats with a fork. Udla. Do you see? We would have put in an u. If we had spoken about udadewethu, we would have said udla ngokhezo. Udadewethu udla ngokhezo. So we would have been saying, my sister eats with a spoon. Do you see that we will not be using them the same way? Their sentences will not then be structured the same way. So let's move on now to the plural of these. The plural is the way it gets a little tricky, because you've got to remember this. And it's boring to have things that you just have to remember instead of there having to be a rule. But there you go. Let's do this. Indodazi. Now we have indoda. Let's say plural. Amadoda. Ingane, izingane. Indodakazi, amadodakazi. Indodana, amadodana. Inkosikazi, amakhosikazi. Oh, by the way, even inkosi, a king, or what others choose to say is a chief, I say it's a king. So inkosi then is amakhosi when it's plural. So do you see that they are not behaving the same way plural? With this ama, where did we see it before? We saw it in class 3. So when you talk about these ones, you will then treat them as though they were class 3 nouns instead of class 5, of class 5 nouns once they are plural. So when we are now talking about amakhosikazi and we are saying they are walking, we would say amakhosikazi ayahamba. Do you see the a that we used when we were talking about amakhanda? It's now here when we are talking about amakhosikazi. Amakhosi ayabusa, as in the kings are, let's say, leading, but really it's not leading, it's ruling. So are ruling. So do you see that that is what the subject concord for this class is plural. When we are making the sentences in the plural form. But in this side here, the only thing we are left with here with the people is ingane, because when we're speaking about them, we will say izingane. Now let's look at the other nouns that we have. The other nouns, they are all behaving the same. They are behaving themselves, and they are all falling in this class. But izindlulamthi, izinja, izindlovu, izingwenya, izingwe, izimbali, izimfolovo. Imfundo is imfundo. There's no plural of your education. There's just education. There's no educations. It's just education. So there's no plural. Ingubo is ingubo. So when we are now talking about them, we will do it differently. Now we are going to say izimbali ziyahamba. I don't know who they are going with, but anyway, izimbali ziyahamba. The flowers are going. Izimfolovo ziyahlaba. They are poking. Anyway, so Do you see that z, z, z? When we were talking about them in the singular, we would have said imbali, right? And then we would have said iyahamba. And then when we are talking about the fork in the singular, we would have said imfologo, iyahlaba. Do you see that we are using an E every single time for the singular? It doesn't matter whether it's starting with an IM or an IN. We are still using an E for the singular. E. So the thing that you must remember with class 5 is that we have nouns that start with IN and IM. They can be people, they can be things. And in those nouns, we also then have nouns that when they are plural, they are no longer in class 5, but they are plural in class 3. So they become ama instead of easy. So for example, we made the example of ingane and we said izingane. We said indlulamith and we said izindlulamith. But we then also have inkosikazi, amakhosikazi, inkosi, amakhosi. Do you see? So just remember that some of them, the plural is in class 3. Inkosazana, a princess, amakhosazana, princesses, but it's always the eldest daughter, the inkosazana and inkosana. It would be the eldest daughter. Even a thing like a what's that thing? A concertina, the instrument, the musical instrument, inkositini ngesizulu. When we are now speaking about them in plural, we will then say amakositini. Ama, not easy, ama. So they would then have their plural in class 3. So anyway, let's move on to class 6. Class 6, we are now changing, we are now saying O instead of the E that we've been on. We've said E with any other vowel, or with any other consonant. We've said E followed by an S. We've said E followed by an N or an M. Now we are on to an U. This U, it is your things that how do you call it? They change. So for example, ponder, the way they change when you're making them plural. So izimpondo. Do you hear the difference when you are now making it a plural? Listen to the way I pronounce the singular. Upondo. Even look at my lips. Upondo. Look at my lips and listen to the sound when I'm making it plural. Easy. Mpondo. Mpondo. Do you hear? There is a difference between the P with the PH and the MP. 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 Do you hear the difference? So they change. One of upondo is a horn, by the way, and then uti is a stick. Once it's plural, it's izinti. Do you hear? T, uti, izinti. Even if you were to put your hand in front of your mouth and just say uti, you will feel there's a bit of your breath coming out and blowing onto your fingers. Uti, upondo. Do you hear? So there's a bit of aspiration when you're saying the singular ones, but once you are saying the plural ones, the sound changes almost completely. So yes, so those are these nouns that are placed here. Now, when we are talking about them, and of course, do you see the plural? The plural is easy. just the same as the ones in class 5, just the same as the ones in class 4. The plural is all easy. But now let's say we are making sentences with this class. The singular is then going to be Lupondo. Let's say it's heavy. So Luyasinda. The horn is heavy. Uti Luyasinda. The horn, the stick is heavy. So the lu is our subject concord. And so we cannot be placing these nouns together with other nouns that are in the other classes that are starting with u, because the way we speak of them is different. Now the plural is the same as the other ones that start with easy, izimpondo, ziyasinda. They're all the same. The horns are heavy. Izinti ziyasinda. The sticks are heavy. Do you see the difference? Now, if we're looking at class 7, there is no, I like to look at it as, when you're thinking an uncountable noun, don't think of it as in it's just only singular. Think of it as in it's not singular, it's not plural. So it is just that. You know, in English, you can say faces and say 3 faces. NgesiZulu, when you say a face, you say ubuso. But when you are saying many faces, you will have to still say ubuso, but now say how many. You know, you cannot just say change now the name, the prefix of ubuso and make it plural. It stays as ubuso, and then you now go ahead and make it plural by saying the number that you are talking about of faces. If you are talking about, I don't know, meanness, ubunja, or I don't know, you can call it meanness, you can call it being horrible, that behavior though, ubunja. It's just that. It's ubunja, just ugliness, just meanness. There's no singular or plural of it, it's just as it is. So it's this class is full of abstracts as well. So like things like ubunja, like I've just said, coming from inja. We saw inja in class 5. If you are thinking of ubulwane, for example, isilwane would be in class 4. But now when we are saying animalistic behavior, then we find that in class in class 6. So they are not going to behave the same way. Look at it, think about a person who is a thief, isigebengu. You'll find that in class 4, isigebengu. But when we are now looking in class 6, ubugebengu is thievery. So the action itself, you know, so we are making it into a noun and we are saying ubugebengu. So we find that in class, I'm talking about class 7. I don't know why I keep saying class 6 still. So you'll find that in class 7. So abstracts, you find them in class 7. So let's just write here class 7. So let's just write uncountable. So I made an example of ubuso. Ubuso, buhle. Let's make an adjective. Buhle. So the face is beautiful. Bu. Do you see that subject concord? Bu. Now let's say ubulwane. Bubi. We are using B as our adjective here. B is ugly. So I was saying ubulwane bubi. So animalistic behavior is ugly. So do you see that bu? And there it is again. There is no plural because there is also no singular. They are just uncountable. If you were to think, let's make another one just for the sake of making another. Let's think. Oh yeah, I did say ubugebengu and that. So ubugebengu. Buyabulalisa. So basically I'm saying thievery can cause a person to die, you know. So buyabulalisa. And it doesn't only just kill as in like the physical dying of a person, as in death, as we know, but it's also just spiritual. Something inside the person dies when they are a thief. Something must have died. Something. Not that, yeah, but anyway. So thievery, I hope I'm spelling it right. Yeah, I am. Thievery basically causes one to die, basically, or kills. Now let's move on to class 8. Class 8 nouns are the ones that start with uku or uku. So if you are looking at these nouns, you are saying, you are taking verbs, like for example, the verb to do wrong, wrong, doing, or sinning. That's a verb. Now we are taking this verb and we are saying, let's make it a noun. So we will then say, actually, I am wrong to say honor is wrongdoing. Honor is wrong and sin. Now let's take it and then say ukona. We've now said sinning, and now we are now saying wrongdoing. So now when we are talking about them and we are saying sinning, ukona, kuyakhalisa, makes one cry. So sinning makes one cry. I don't know, I hope so. So do you see the verb changed into a noun? And we put uku. Now look at, for example, the verb la, which is to eat. If I say ukudla, I'm now saying to eat or eating. Now say I want to say eating is a chore. Not that food or whatever, but the actual process of eating, the action is a chore. So I would then say ukudla do you see that ku? It's the same ku that you just saw here when we were talking about ukona. And then let's say, for example, another verb, a verb that starts with a different vowel. Let's say a verb that starts with an A. We used akha earlier in class 1, so let's use it again here. Build. Now, if we are making it into a class 8 noun, we will then say uku and akha, and that will give us ukwakha. So when the noun, when a verb is starting with an A, we change that second U, this one here. We change the second U into a W. So, ukwakha. Ehla. Go down. That's a verb. Now let's say going down. So the actual action of going down, right? And we are saying ku, and ehla. And then that gives us ukwehla. And so look at that. This U became a W, a W. Do you see? Now let's talk about them. Let's make sentences about these two. Ukwakha. That's what we will say. We're not saying umaki. We're not saying akha. We're not saying another noun that we could have derived from the verb akha, which is isakhiwo, which is a building. We're not saying those. We're saying ukwakha, which is the actual process of building, putting together a building, so construction. So we are saying ukwakha, I don't know. Ukwakha kunjani? I don't know. Kuyakhathaza, I suppose. I've never had a great experience of building. So anyway, ukwakha kuyakhathaza. So khathala is to be tired, so tired, the verb. But khathaza is something making another person tired. So if I say uyangikhathaza, I mean you are making me tired. So kuyakhathaza, it makes one tired. So building makes one tired or tires one. Now, if you are used to, I don't know, hiking or walking and even cycling, then you would know this one. When you're going uphill, it's hard, but when you're going downhill, it's easy. So, ukwehla kulula. Going down is easy. Look at that K is what I'd like us to pay attention to. That K is our subject concord. Since I've made an example of something that is ukwehla, let me make an example about ukunyuka as well. So the verb nyuka, which means to go up. So if we are then speaking about it, we say ukunyuka. Do you see this one doesn't have a vowel at the beginning? So we just put in uku and there's no certain construction and addition and blending and changing letters. You just put in your uku and you move on. So uku nyuka. So now uku nyuka. Ku nzima. Or kulukhuni. It's hard. Kunzima, it's hard. Kulukhuni, it's hard or difficult. So do you see? There is our k. So yeah, so I hope this would have explained these nouns and the grouping of them, and so that you can see how to talk about them. And then apply the rule. If you've applied the rule, you're talking about the noun in present tense, and you're making this an example now about the same noun in the past tense or in the future tense or in the negative, still remember the subject concord. Don't forget the subject concord. It doesn't change. It doesn't change. It doesn't go away. So don't now go and use a different subject concord. So if you're saying ukunyuka and then you suddenly say lunzima, it's not going to be lu. It's not going to change. It's still going to be ku. you know, even if it was a long time ago, then you would say kwakunzima. You know, it was a long time ago. It was hard a long time ago. In English, it's simply it was hard, whether it was yesterday or this morning or 2 years ago, it would still be it was hard. But in isiZulu, you have to say, you have to show that you're talking about something that happened a long time ago. So that's why we are adding that kwa in there. So kwakunzima. It's now a long time ago. So it does not go away once you're now changing the tense. If you are going to make it for future, you are saying ukunyuka kuzoba nzima. It's going to be hard. Kuzoba, it's going to be